Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Ocean Harvest Technology Group PLC investor presentation. Throughout this recorded presentation, investors will be in listen-only mode. Questions are encouraged. They can be submitted at any time via the Q&A tab that's just situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. Please just simply type in your questions and press send. The company may not be in a position to answer every question it receives during the meeting itself. However, the company will review all questions submitted today and publish responses where it is appropriate to do so, and these will be available via your Investor Meet Company dashboard. Before we begin, I would like to submit the following poll, and I would now like to hand you over to the executive management team from Ocean Harvest Technology. Mark, good morning, sir.
Good morning, and thank you very much for joining us again today. Some of you have met us before, and some of you maybe for the first time today. We, in addition to doing our periodic results presentations, we did commit when we did the IPO that we would do a series of additional presentations which give a little bit more of a deep dive into different components of our business. And so today, we'll talk broadly about the business, but specifically diving in to talk about the supply chain and how we source our seaweed, what the benefits of that are, and how that all works, because it's a big global operation. So with me for that, it's not just myself. We've got a team of three that you see us here. We'll do a brief intro. I'm Mark Williams, the CEO, hopefully presented to a number of you before. Prior to being in a seaweed business, which makes sales into animal feed, I was in an alternative protein business, which was selling into animal feed, a product made from insects. But seaweed is certainly a faster growing business than that. Haddon?
Hello again, I'm Haddon Graham. Some of you have met me before. I grew up on a farm, so I've been in the agriculture industry all my life, and I've spent the last 30 years in startups in the animal feed business. Thank you.
Basil, in Ireland?
Yeah, Basil Kennedy here, based in the Irish office and also the Vietnam office. I oversee the seaweed procurement globally and also oversee the production plant we have in Vietnam. Thank you.
Okay, so just a reminder of what it is we do. The core business that Ocean Harvest Technology has is based on the research that the company did and then subsequently developed and commercialized, which demonstrates that the seaweeds that we use, various species of seaweed, have polysaccharides and other bioactive compounds present in them, which act as a prebiotic in the animals that are fed those. So it's effectively gut health for livestock and other animals. And to explain, I guess, simply the prebiotic effect, antibiotics, as you would know, target bad bacteria. Probiotics are the good bacteria which are put into diets, but they don't always get absorbed in the right place or have the desired effect that they would have if they were produced naturally. Prebiotics go to the right place in the digestive system and encourage the production of good bacteria. In our case, that's the production of butyrates and other bacteria that are involved in nutrient absorption. So in short, the compounds that we work with in the seaweed encourage more effective nutrient absorption in the animals. Now, the business has been going for many years, and it's got loads of research which demonstrates that when you include our blended seaweed ingredient into animal feed at an inclusion rate of about 1/4%, you see multiple production benefits in the animals. And those core benefits, because of the improved nutrient absorption, are better growth rates, more efficient feed usage, and lower mortality. So these core benefits of our product, I guess they present themselves in different customer propositions in different parts of the world and in different species. So, for example, one of our earlier customers was a broiler producer, so chicken meat producer in North America. When they first trialed our product versus their traditional diets, they saw their mortality rates drop from over 8% to under 4%. and they saw an improvement in the feed efficiency ratio as well. So feeding each bird less feed to get to the same growth point. So that combination improved their profitability significantly per bird, and they've been using the product for 4 years now. I guess another application which is interesting is because of the prebiotic effect and the absorption of nutrients more effectively, we found that particularly in piglet diets, our product is a good replacement for antibiotics. Now, antibiotics have not been in diets in this country or Europe for many, many years, but in North America, they still are. And we have a customer in Canada who wanted to replace their antibiotics with another product. And they found when trialing ocean feed as an ingredient in their piglet diets, that they got exactly the same growth rates from the piglet without using antibiotics, but using our product instead. And in addition to that, they saw reductions in mortality. So those benefits have continued for them, and they've been a long-term customer as well. This year we've had good success with layers. Laying chickens, laying hens. Actually, we did a trial in Taiwan, which we talked to you about in June. And on the back of that, with the data showing more egg production and better egg quality, we've seen that business grow as well. So, around the world and through the species, we've got multiple selling propositions, but all based on this core benefit of growth rates, lower mortality, and greater feed efficiency. Now, the market for this is significant, and our visibility around how we can grow in here is clear. So I'll get Haddon to take you through that.
Yes, as Mark says, this is a large market and truly global market. So each year there's just over 1.1 billion tons of animal feed produced. That has a value of around $500 billion a year, and it's growing fairly well with GDP. So as people get more money, they tend to eat more meat and more animal products. The area we're particularly active in is the feed additive market. That's worth around $40 billion a year, and is growing slightly quicker, driven by some of the things we'll discuss later, particularly the move to more sustainability and away from synthetic additives such as antibiotics. There are two important, I would call them risk mitigation factors. The first is that there are actually quite a number of animal species, ranging from poultry through to pets and everything else in between. And there's also the industry is global, so you do find animal feed production in essentially every country in the world, and certainly every region, and it's fairly well split 30-30-30 between Asia Pacific, EMEA, and the Americas. So if you have a problem in one area, there's always another area that remains active. As you know, our current turnover in this large business is in the single digit millions. You can see in this graph here the current customers. If these current customers, as they continue to do, spread the use of our product across their business, that would rise to somewhere around 25 million. And one example of that, Mark talked about our Canadian customer who's feeding our product in his antibiotic-free piglet diets. That's the baby pigs only. He's now testing in the sow diet, so that's the mothers of those baby piglets. If that is successful, that will quadruple his offtake. And many of our other customers, the vast majority of our other customers, are doing the same. So they're using in part of their operation and looking to extend across the operation. If they do that and fully use across their operation, that would increase our sales to around 25 million. So clearly we have strong visibility with those current customers, up to 25 million turnover a year. We also at the minute have around 20 customers who are trialing the product with the hope to use the product. If those customers come through successfully, that will add another 15 million, so taking us up to 40 million. So with that 40 million turnover, we have strong visibility over, because it's either current customers or customers who are already testing the product and who we already have strong connections with. If we look at the overall market, I said this is a big market. You see the right-hand column. This is the turnover we would achieve if we sold to 1% of the potential market, excluding China. China is the world's biggest feed market. It's somewhere around 18% of the global market, but it is actually quite a difficult market to penetrate and quite difficult to stay in there. So we've excluded China, and 1% of the 1% penetration of our potential global market would take us somewhere close to 100 million euro turnover. So what's driving this growth? Well, there are a number of drivers in a minute, but the biggest one really is profitability. If our customers don't make money, then they don't buy our product, quite simply. And Mark mentioned the two main drivers of profitability are, number one, feed efficiency. So when you use our product, the animals use their feed more efficiently, more effectively. And remember that feed costs are up to 75-80% of the total variable cost of animal production these days. An improvement in feed efficiency is very quickly goes straight onto the bottom line. So that's the other big driver, of course, is mortality. If you lose animals to death, then it is a big cost, both economically and emotionally to the farmer. But the other drivers really, and we'll go through some of them later, is sustainability. We're driving all the time to take out synthetic additives and to put in natural, low carbon footprint additives, and Mark will come back to that later. Consistency is very, very important, and we see that with our product we can improve consistency. Very important for the retailers that when they bring in product from the farms, that it is the same every time. And quality is good, and we have all the quality assurances in place that we need to sell globally into the animal feed industry. And the third one is social responsibility, and Mark will talk about that later. But that's one of the things that both Mark and Basil are very driven by, and our business is very driven by. So if I hand back over to you, Mark.
Okay, so I'll just touch on a few items here on the supply chain. So as you can see in this diagram, we have a global overview of our key chain locations. So Ocean Harvest has been sourcing seaweeds globally for over 13 years now. These seaweeds are broken down into 3 different types, red, green, and brown. Nearly all of the seaweed data that is published at the moment tends to focus on cultivated or farmed seaweeds, whereas Ocean Harvest, we simply focus on the wild collection seaweeds that is available in large biomass volumes. Typically, we source the red and green seaweeds from the warmer waters of the North Pacific and Indian Oceans, so namely Vietnam, Philippines, Indonesia, and of late, East Africa. For the brown seaweeds, we source these from the colder waters of the Atlantic Ocean, i.e. Ireland, Scotland, Iceland, and over to East Canada. Our GMP Plus certified processing plant is located in the south of Vietnam, just outside Ho Chi Minh City. Here at this plant, we take in all the seaweeds that we source globally for processing, and then we prepare them for market. We also have warehousing and distribution facilities in Ireland, over in Holland, and also in Iowa in America. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So here in this slide, we're looking at, say, the left-hand side we'll work on first. So as Hayden has already mentioned, the sales growth and the potential that we have in the pipeline. So to balance this growth, we have needed to grow our supply chain over the past few years. You can see from the chart in 2023 that we almost doubled our supply source on last year. It's worth noting that the tonnages that are expressed are in dry weight, not in wet weight. Typically, you find in a lot of seaweed data reports, the numbers are expressed in wet weight. As you can see also, maybe we had a drop there in 2020. So this is mostly down to COVID and the supply restrictions that we had having to deal with it during that time. Even though it was difficult, we still managed to sustain the supply to meet that growing demand. And if I move to the right, the chart on the right-hand side, this demonstrates we have the ability to grow our supply chain even more significantly. Mark asked me to have a look at the visibility within our own current supply chain in order for us to match the sales growth. Here you can see we do have good visibility, and we do know there is opportunities for us to increase up to maybe 10,000 tons using this supply chain. I was recently down in South America on a supply mission. So here we came across notable amounts of biomass, and we do expect to tap into that supply chain next year. Considering what I learned on that visit, the potential in that region is pretty good for us looking forward. So looking at the last chart, the last column in the chart, this shows that we do have with the additional supply lines in place, we do have visibility up to over 15,000 tons. So beyond doubt, we have a great deal of biomass available globally. Much of it still remains untapped. I think Mark will touch on that later as well. And this gives us the potential to help fuel our growth. So I'll just move on to the next slide. So here on this slide, we're just mentioning a couple of the items on sustainability practices, and we feel that we are in a good place with that. So the rationale for wild collection seaweeds is that they are rather invasive. They are not attached to seabed or rocky holdings. They tend to grow and bloom more naturally in the warmer waters of the oceans. And speaking from experience, I've seen these 1 to 2 meter thick canopy blooms just slightly submerged, and they form like a forest just beneath the surface. So it's pretty amazing to see. These wild blooms generally could fill a bay or even become a major obstruction to marine life and also to seaweed cultivation farming practices. These wild blooms are now more common in many, many regions globally and have been increasing over the past few years. They do tend to create issues if they're not collected, worst case being pollution if left there for quite a while. It's also made a lot of news over the past few years, say, for example, over in the Caribbean, where they had major, major issues. It really affected their tourism and fisheries industry. And also worth to note, I guess, that in these regions where we do source, the local communities and government agencies are very supportive in the fact that we do remove these blooms from the waters. They especially, as I mentioned, they especially benefit the fisheries and the tourism sectors. Mark will now go through the resourceful.
Great, thanks, Basil. As Basil said, we don't use cultivated seaweeds, we use wild blooming seaweeds. This diagram simplifies the process, which is referred to as eutrophication. But these wild blooms are increasing in biomass around the world because, as we know, the nutrients washing into the sea from human activity, in particular agricultural activity, is giving these blooms more nutrients to grow on. So with all that agricultural runoff, we've certainly seen more biomass available in the areas where these grow. As Basil said, if these don't get collected, as the diagram represents, those seaweed blooms utilize a lot of the oxygen in the sea around them, and then you actually see fisheries disappear. And then, the worst is that actually when they decompose, and some of these seaweeds are only around for like 4 months, 5 months before they start to decompose. And in doing so, they create a big pollutive problem and cause this problem, which is referred to on the side as eutrophication. Any scientist will talk to you about the global problem of green tides or red tides, and that is essentially this, where the seaweed biomass gets essentially out of control. So clearly removing those is a big sustainability benefit for the local environment. I guess another sustainability benefit of using the seaweed as an ingredient in animal feed is because of this growing cycle, seaweed does not use arable land, fresh water, or fertilizers. And virtually all other natural products that go into animal feed use all three of those. And as a result of that, seaweed has a much lower carbon footprint than the carbon footprint of other ingredients that go into animal feed. We did an exercise earlier this year with an independent third party to map the life cycle analysis of our particular seaweed supply chain and our processing and our distribution to customers. So it calculated that for 1 ton of our ocean feed product, there is 433 kilograms of CO2 equivalent emissions. Those are the direct emissions from sourcing, processing, distribution. We then have a corporate overhead allocation of emissions, which brings up total emissions to 596 number you see there. But to compare this with other ingredients in animal feed, we look at the direct emissions of 433 kilograms, and you can see it's materially less than other much more common ingredients in animal feed. So, wheat, oats, maize, barley, soy in particular, they all use a lot of arable land, fresh water, and fertilizers when being grown and processed, and as such, they have a much higher carbon footprint than seaweed does. Now, the majority of our carbon footprint is shipping. And so as we get bigger and we have multiple, we move from one production site to multiple production sites, our shipping footprint will get smaller, and you'll see the direct emissions come down even more. The story is even better when you look at it in combination through what the seaweed does when it's growing and what it does in the animal when it's sold as an end product. The net headline is for 1 ton of ocean feed sold to an animal feed producer, it reduces the CO2 emissions from the feed producer by 10 tons. So 1 ton sold actually pulls 10 tons of CO2 emissions out of the food chain. That's because the seaweed absorbs CO2 during its growth phase, and there's plenty of research to support the calculations that we've done there of absorbing a ton of CO2 per ton of our product. We then obviously have a footprint of producing it, and then there are the savings made in the feed chain. I talked at the beginning about feed efficiency ratios. So here, for example, we sell a product, say we sell a ton of the product to a customer and they include it at 1/4%. That means it goes into 400 tons of feed. We typically see 5% improvements in feed conversion from using our product. So it means 20 tons less feed is used with those animals, and that reduces the carbon footprint by 10 tons. So that's how we get this calculation. So clearly, whilst we are a small ingredient in the feeds, our inclusion has a material reduction on the carbon footprint of the production of those animals. We mentioned the social responsibility benefits. I mean, Basil talked to you about the supply chain. It is global and it is well diverse around a number of coastal regions. And a lot of those coastal regions are fairly low in economic development. So we've observed material contributions to those communities through the introduction of our sourcing activities. Most of, particularly in Southeast Asia and East Africa, most of the people we source our seaweeds from have a number of economic activities in their villages and their areas. A lot of them do cultivate seaweeds and they sell those into other industries such as pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, or food. And they have fishing activities. Quite often they don't realize until we approach them or our representatives approach them that these big green tides of invasive seaweeds or red tides of invasive seaweed that bloom annually just off their shoreline, they don't realize they can get paid to collect that, sun dry it, and have it available for collection by us or our representatives. So it's incremental economic activity for them, as well as clearing out the seas to further prosper their existing activities of cultivated seaweeds and fishing. So these villages each earn additional tens of thousands of US dollars a year from us. We have strict policies in place around what practices are acceptable from a labor perspective, and those are enforced by our visits and our audits, as well as those of our suppliers. And we're going through an SA 8000 audit process at the moment, so we can verify that and get certificated on it. But it is very pleasing to see the benefits that these activities have in these regions. And to be fair, it's not just in Southeast Asia. Or in Africa. Clearly, that picture there shows someone in the North Atlantic, and our sourcing activities is bringing additional economic prosperity to those regions as well. The point here on quality is important, and Haddon raised it. we've talked about all the good stuff that's in these seaweeds, but you'd be surprised to know how much bad stuff can also be in these seaweeds. They are prone for high levels of heavy metal concentrations, iodine, arsenic, as well as the more obvious impurities such as plastics that we get from the seas now, sand and other things like that. So it's very important that when we've scoped this supply chain, that you're getting the seaweeds species and from the areas where these quality issues are not prevalent. And we test every batch that comes into our factory. And I'm not going to go through the detail of what this data shows, but it's showing you for the same type of seaweed from 3 different areas, what is the presence of different impurities. And so we measure all of that and make sure that it is compliant with our standards, but also the feed regulator standards that are required before it goes into our production process. So we've talked about where the supply chain is at the moment. I just wanted to cover off where to next with supply. Basil gave you a graphic there of where we have near-term visibility of growing the supply chain. That's being done through a number of ways. We are looking at increasing the biomass we source from existing suppliers, and we're being very successful with that in certain regions, but also at identifying additional regions that we can source the biomass from. We don't like to put more suppliers into one region because it tends to create disruption at the harvester level. So we work with very few people or exclusively within one region. The expansion is happening geographically around Southeast Asia. Basil talked about the recent expansion into Africa and the potential into South America. Now, the relationship with these harvesters is very much driven on relationship. It won't surprise you to know that there are not contracts or there is not credit in place that we buy the seaweed from. The reason that these suppliers supply to us year in, year out is because us or our representatives turn up every afternoon to pay cash for the biomass that they have they have harvested and they have dried. So our relationship with them has seen us have some very stable supply arrangements with these various suppliers. In addition to that, we co-invest with some of the equipment that they need to do this, and that creates further loyalty. We are looking at doing something more strategic than simply just having that relationship. A recent example was with one of our brown seaweed suppliers. We actually lent them some money to help fund their increase in capacity. And that has resulted in them increasing their capacity, and we get access to that increasing supply. We're looking at replicating arrangements like that with other suppliers, either through putting in place more equipment or, maybe moving into mechanical drying as opposed to sun drying. And also to grow the supply chain, we're always looking at using additional seaweeds. We've got good visibility, very strong visibility over the biomass of the seaweeds that we currently source. But by expanding the species that we work with, we can further expand the visibility of that footprint expansion. So we've concentrated on the supply chain today. I just thought I'd finish up with a bit of a summary as to overall why we believe Ocean Harvest Technology is a very strong investment case for you to look at. We're operating in a very large market. As Haddon said, the animal feed market is hugely significant. We're nascent in that business at the moment and have a huge growth opportunity in it. We are the largest supplier of dried blended seaweed ingredients into the animal feed market at the moment. We're the only one that we see in that market doing it at commercial scale. So we've got a leadership position there. The intellectual property is demonstrated. We're not going out there to try and prove to people what our product does. We've proved that. We've got university results. We've got commercial trials with customers which demonstrate that. And that forms part of our barriers to entry. We've got 3 key areas. One is the research and the trial data that demonstrates what our product does. 2 is the supply chain, which we've talked about today, which is clearly well established and gives us access to large volumes of biomass. And the third one is the nature of the customers. They take time to work with the customer to get our product included in their diets. Inevitably, that always involves a trial at their side, which costs them time and money, so they need to be committed to trial it. And so that can have an impact on the time it takes us to convert new customers. But once we've got them, they tend to be stickier. Once you're in the diets and they've seen the benefits of your product in the diets, we found that all our major customers have been consistent and buy consistent volumes from us each year. And I think the other point there is, we talked today a lot about the sustainability benefits of our product and the, what it does in the animals, what taking the seaweed does by taking it out of the sea, what sustainability benefits that does, and what benefits developing our supply chain brings for the communities that we work with. So there's a lot of additional benefits to the growth story that we've talked about, which all in combination we think brings some very robust prospects for the business. So I will pause there and hand back to Jake.
Perfect. Mark, Haddon, Basil, thank you very much indeed for your presentation this morning. Ladies and gentlemen, please do continue to submit your questions just by using the Q&A tab that's situated on the right-hand corner of your screen. But just while the team take a few moments to review those questions that were submitted already, I would like to remind you that a recording of this presentation, along with a copy of the slides and the published Q&A, can be accessed via your investor dashboard. Mark, Basil, Haddon, as you can see there in the Q&A tab, we have received a number of questions throughout your presentation this morning, and thank you to all of those on the call for taking the time to submit their questions. But Mark, if I may just hand back to you just to chair the Q&A session with the team, just read out those questions and give your responses where appropriate to do so, and then I'll pick up from you at the end. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So there's one here which says, with such positive results that we've seen, how do you see this transition into commercial traction with end customers? I mean, I think we have existing customers. We've already seen that commercial traction, and some of our customers have been customers for 4 or 5 years. So the focus of Haddon and his global sales team of 6 is to continue to work with existing customers around growing their usage through different species and expanded geographic footprint, but also working with potential new customers by showing them the results that we've achieved and then working with them to replicate those results in their own production systems. Haddon, maybe you just give a bit more color around that trend, that commercial traction, and what that process involves and your experience in doing that.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Our customers tend to be, million-ton producers. As a business to business, we ship to them mainly in full containers, let's say 1 container a month. So to make a change to their feed, it's actually quite a big decision in terms of your personal credibility in that business, but also in terms of economics. So these customers will, almost without exception, will test the product. After they first review your data, they obviously understand that other people in the industry are using. Then they will get you into their schedule. They will test the product, and if that test is as positive as they hope it to be, and we expect it to be, then they will move into using. And quite often they don't use 100% across the board to start with. They might put part of their operation on for maybe 6 months, and then they expand it and keep going. And quite often they don't use it for all species. We did talk earlier about the Canadian guys who use it first in their baby pigs, and now they're starting to test in the mother pigs. So they tend to move across species. So it is a step-by-step process, but it is consistent. It does actually give us good visibility. So I can say to Basil 6 months before we need the product, look, you need to find me some more product because these trials are coming through. So it has positives as well, and we have visibility, and the customer is sticky once we get them on. But of course, it is sometimes frustrating to have to wait for 6, 9, 10 months to get a new customer on board.
Thank you. The next question here is more on supply. It says, when looking at the supply chain, how do you manage supply agreements so as to not disappoint either side when we're in the build-out phase? We don't have supply agreements with the majority of the suppliers that we work with, just by the nature of where they operate. In the North Atlantic, we have more, I guess, traditional arrangements with some of the suppliers of the brown seaweed. But in Southeast Asia and in Eastern Africa, we, as I said, we tend to work with a supplier in a particular geographic region. In most of those instances, before they were sourcing those particular seaweeds for us, those seaweeds were staying in the sea. So we've developed a new supply chain with them. It's a new business line for them. Quite often they are already doing other seaweeds for other industries or other economic activities in that area. So we've helped them build up an additional business line to their business. We found that the loyalty generated by us buying every month and being consistent in buying that and growing sort of slowly and consistently with them has created that benefit. Having said that, we do co-invest with some of the equipment that they need, that the harvesters need to do this. And, I think when you think of it from a harvester's perspective, and particularly the experience through COVID, where, they're relying on a cash crop to get, people to come every couple of days and buy the biomass. Ocean Harvest Technology and our representatives have been doing that consistently for 4 or 5 years. Even during COVID, we continued, we bought less, but we continued to buy, and those people continued to generate an income. So if someone was to come and offer, we've had experiences where people have come to offer, particularly from China, different pricing for a one-off batch of seaweed. Our suppliers have not supplied them because they worry about, are they coming back the next day? So that long-term relationship we have has generated support. But as I said in my presentation, we are focusing on doing some more strategic alignment with some of these larger suppliers because as they grow, they will need more investment. And we may look at things like processing on site or mechanical drying on site, and all of which that would help us if we work with them and invest with them to even more cement that relationship even more. There are typically not a lot of buyers of the types of seaweeds that we buy at the moment. So we haven't seen material levels of competition for the biomass. I guess the other point is, Basil's got visibility of a lot more biomass that is available than we currently use. So as we grow, we know which areas to move into. I'll move on to another question here. Yeah. So what are the key priorities for Ocean Harvest Technologies for the next 6 months? Our priorities are consistent and they're in 3 areas. One is R&D. So we have the R&D, which demonstrates what our product does. And we've also got a lot of data with customers, which demonstrate what it does. But I think it was last week, we made an announcement, and when we presented in June, we made a series of announcements where we're continually doing additional research to demonstrate incremental and additional benefits of our product. The gut health benefits of our product do more than just produce better growth rates. Last week we demonstrated that our product in poultry gives the animal much greater resilience against a disease called necrotic enteritis, which is a big cost to the poultry industry. So we've published those results. It's very interesting to poultry producers, and it gives them even greater reason and rationale to buy our product. So we continue to invest in the R&D where we believe we can get additional commercial traction with our product. The second area is investing in sales and marketing. Hadn't talked about the customer acquisition cycle, so we're deeply focused on continuing to grow that customer base and increase how much each customer buys. And so the focus from his team is on that. And then the third key focus area is the supply chain, which we've talked about today, and particularly our focus on how we grow that and continue to diversify to reduce its risk. So next 6 months, you'll continue to see us focus on those 3 areas. There's a question here. Do you have a strong pipeline of trials? Is there any update on how these are going and leading to growing in sales? Haddon, why don't you cover off, I guess, just 2 elements to our trials. We look at trials which do prove new applications, like the ones I've just talked about, and then we do trials with customers who are looking to use the product. So maybe if you give an update on that, Haddon.
Okay, we do give regular updates on trials as we complete them. Not customer trials, obviously, because they quite often are confidential, but in the trials that we run, and we have just completed the one on necrotic enteritis, which is a major disease in antibiotic-free poultry. We have a couple of trials starting very soon, or just started actually, one of them in methane production in ruminants, which are key to us. And then we have a number of trials, mainly with customers, ongoing. I think it's around 15 at the minute, in all different species, from pets through to, I think, everything actually: pet, equine, aquaculture, ruminants, poultry, and swine. So a lot of trials going on. There's one other set of trials we don't talk too much about, but it's an ongoing work for us within Ocean Harvest is the characterization of different seaweeds, not only seaweeds from different types of seaweeds, but also seaweeds from different parts of the world. So we have greater flexibility in our sourcing and in our product formulations.
Sorry, I was just going off mute. Another question here saying, has Ocean Harvest approached agricultural feed merchants to promote OHT products to the smaller farmers growing on livestock for the meat market? Haddon, why don't you take that and just talk through? I mean, we do go B2B to the feed mills, but we also do work with distributors.
Yeah, as I said, we hinted earlier, our major customers tend to be integrators, so people who produce feed and then feed it to animals and actually sell the product, sometimes brand it directly to the consumer. So those are the big customers who make the decision to buy and see the benefit of the better performance and the more profitability within the same organization. There is a substantial amount of our product that does go into the compound feed industry and into the premix industry, and will thus get down onto farm level. And that would be particularly true, probably more in the ruminant or the dairy cow industry. The swine and poultry tend to be quite integrated, but certainly outside that, we do deal directly with large feed producers and large suppliers into those feed producers.
And then I guess in different countries of the world, there are different models. So in Asia, we are more reliant on distributors.
Yeah, that's true. In Asia, we're more reliant on distributors. In North America and Latin America, it tends to be more driven by integrators who dominate the market. Whereas Europe and Asia, it's more down into smaller producers.
Good. I think, Jake, we've covered all those questions there.
Mark, Basil, Haddon, absolutely. And thank you very much indeed for addressing all of those questions that came in from investors this morning. And of course, if there are any further questions that do come through, we'll make these available to you immediately after the presentation has ended, just for you to review, to then add any additional responses, of course, where it's appropriate to do so. And we'll publish all those responses out on the platform. But Mark, perhaps before really just looking to redirect those on the call to provide you with their feedback, which I know is particularly important to yourself and the company, if I could please just ask you for a few closing comments just to wrap up with, that'd be great.
Great. Well, thanks all for your attention today. For those of you tuning in again, appreciate your ongoing support. I think we've focused today on the supply chain, which hopefully given you, I guess, comfort around the fact that as we continue to grow our customer side, we have very clear visibility of our ability to fulfill that and match the growth in customers with the growth in seaweed supply. And hopefully giving you a flavour for all the benefits that supply chain has for the animal feed industry, but the broader world and communities that we work with in general. So thank you. We'll be reporting back again early next year. We look forward to continue to report on how we develop in the areas of our research and development, customer acquisition, and supply chain build out. So thank you.
Mark, that's great. And thank you once again for updating investors this morning. Could I please ask investors not to close this session, as you'll now be automatically redirected for the opportunity to provide your feedback in order that the management team can really better understand your views and expectations. This will only take a few moments to complete, but I'm sure will be greatly valued by the company. On behalf of the management team of Ocean Harvest Technology Group PLC, we would like to thank you for attending today's presentation. That now concludes today's session, so good morning to you all.